Hello and welcome to EdLab Live, a live version of our Ask the EdLab, where we interview experts in a field to help answer your questions. Today, our higher ed reporter, Ashleigh Panoo, and I will be interviewing Dr. Larissa Mercado-Lopez. She is an associate professor of women's studies at Fresno State, where she teaches courses on women of color and Latina health. On campus, she advocates for student parents and advises students in multiple capacities. Larissa also serves as director on the CSU Student Success Network Conference. So, for today's topic, we'll be talking about some of the struggles and recommendations for college students with kids. Last week, Ashleigh Panoo wrote a fantastic story titled "Students with Kids Are Now Teachers During Coronavirus. How can California colleges help?" College students who are parents make up nearly a quarter of the student population. Student parents are one of Fresno State's largest yet most hidden groups. So without further ado, let's get started with Ashleigh.
Hi. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Mercado-Lopez for being here. How are you today?
Doing well.
Good to hear. So actually, first, I want to talk a little bit about the story that was published last Thursday. So I spoke with you, Dr. Mercado, and the story really covered about how students with children are coping during the pandemic. And we'll drop that story link in the comments if anyone wants to read it or share it. I talked to a few Fresno State students, and some seemed like they were pushing through, and others seemed like they were feeling like they might not be able to carry on much longer. There were a lot of unknowns and a lot of stressors, like having to be a teacher to their kids who are also out of school, and then caring for their toddlers and babies. One student said she had lost a lot of her motivation because graduation had been postponed. So when we talk about college students, we don't always think about students who have children of their own. And you, Dr. Mercado, have described student parents as a hidden population. Can you talk about what you mean by that, and why is tracking the student population at Fresno State so difficult?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you, first of all, for taking on this topic and for writing such a wonderful article and really giving a space to the voices of student parents who usually feel, very underrepresented. So institutions collect data on a wide range of demographic characteristics, but usually parenting status is not one of them. This can be traced to historical notions of typical or traditional college students that really don't reflect the realities of our student population. So while student parents are visible in our classrooms and on campus, they remain relatively hidden or even invisible within the data. We don't really see them in campus brochures, in our diversity statements, in our public narratives about who Fresno State students are. And usually folks are pretty shocked to hear that we estimate that 20 to 25% of Fresno State students are student parents. And this is a number that we came up with based on national and state data. So we can't really know who they are unless we can identify them, and we can't do that without a formal data collection process on campus. So in response to that, I was able to work with our administration on campus to create a page within the student portal where students can voluntarily submit their data, their dependent data. And what makes it difficult to even do that, to collect that information, is that, one, it's voluntary. Two, students don't even know that it's there, so they don't know to look for it. And three, I think there might be this perception that if they were to self-identify as parents, that that information would somehow be used against them. So my plan this year was to do a mass, send out a mass email with information about the dependent data page, and to educate students on why we were collecting this very general, non-invasive data, and what our purposes were for having that data. There were some staffing changes in the office I was going to be working with on that, so I wasn't able to do it this year, but it's something that I'm definitely going to do at the beginning of the next academic year. And so, we're asking for very general information. We're asking for the date of birth of their children. or of their dependent. We're asking for percentage of care provided for the dependent, and we're asking for percentage of financial support for the dependent. And we also expanded the relationship categories. So if you are a son or daughter who is taking care of an elderly parent, or maybe a sibling with special needs, and you're able to claim them as your dependent. And that gives us a wider understanding of our students that are engaged in caregiving activities. So we're hoping that, through this data collection, we can, first count how many student parents we have. We can look at, the extent of the caregiving and financial support that they're providing, and also look at correlations between their caregiving status and factors such as GPA, retention, graduation, so that we can get a sense of their outcomes and figure out how to better support them.
Yeah, and so you said that they're not reflected in brochures or anything like that. What would be the benefit of having them kind of come out of the shadows, I guess?
One of the things that that was one of the sentiments that was repeated in the survey that I administered a few years ago was a desire for recognition. So, going back to the invisibility within the data, student parents feel unrecognized. And so having, a brochure that depicts a parent and their child, or even a pregnant student, right, which seems really radical, I think, to a lot of folks, would help them feel more of a sense of, recognition, and hopefully that would also contribute to their sense of belonging on campus.
Yeah, so what else can higher education institutions do to better support students even after the pandemic? And will you talk about some of the work that you've done?
Sure. Yeah. So, going back to the data collection, that's really important, getting some baseline data, or if data is already being collected, maybe engaging in more rigorous data collection. That's one thing. Something else that's really, really important is education around resources and pregnancy rights. So when I did this survey in 2016, I was asking, what is your level of awareness of the lactation rooms, of the child care centers, of the fact that the student cupboard provides formula and baby wipes on occasion. Now they provide diapers. And what so many students were saying was that the survey itself was really educational because they didn't know those resources existed on campus. So I think that communication about what is available to students is really, really important, and is just the very minimum of what we could do. Also, more awareness of pregnancy rights. So Title IX protects against discrimination on the basis of sex, and we usually in higher ed associate Title IX with sexual assault in sports, but it also covers students who are pregnant. And so, many students don't realize that their absences due to doctor's appointments related to their pregnancy are excused. And I've just heard, harrowing stories of students who have lost entire semesters of credit because they were not aware of their Title IX rights. Their professors were not aware of their Title IX rights. So they either failed the course or were given incompletes and were forced to retake the entire course in person when, their situation could have been easily resolved with, taking a final exam at a different time. And so, this has their awareness or lack thereof of Title IX has really, major implications for their degree completion. And I think also, creating or working towards creating a family-friendly climate and policy is really important as well. And this can happen at the level of the university, within each individual college, and in the classroom. And, I think what's really important for faculty and students and administrators to know is that student parents, they graduate with higher GPAs than non-parenting students on average. They also use their time better and more productively than non-parenting students. A lot of research has looked at the use of discretionary time. And, you know, even though they have less time, they use it better. And so, you know, when we communicate to students through our climate, right, through our policies, that student parent identities are burdensome or that student parents don't belong in academia, we're really pushing out scholars, you know, with excellent qualities and high ambitions, that in a more supportive environment would have otherwise, you know, thrived and have been successful. So, you know, the irony is that, you know, while these students account for some of the most successful students on campus, they feel invisible and unrecognized.
Yeah, and so you said in the story that something good that's come out of this this like rush to online and getting everybody what they need, that conversations about equity have come out. So now, what do those conversations look like surrounding student parents?
Yeah, so I think, you know, Fresno State, we've always had this high awareness of the inequities that our students experience. But now that we've gone online and have gone online very suddenly, that transition has really amplified or magnified some of our students' vulnerabilities. And it's also exposed some of our practices and policies that probably do more harm than good. And so this is, you know, it's a whole new teaching world for us, whether or not we've taught online before. And it's making us ask questions about, you know, reasonable, you know, ask questions in different ways, you know, about, you know, what is considered a reasonable workload. You know, what about privacy concerns, you know, around Zoom in terms of, you know, their appearance on camera, you know, what can be heard through the audio, you know, attendance policies, assumptions about their access to digital devices or to the internet. You know, and so as faculty, we've had to adjust some of our own expectations. And I can sense that, you know, it's easier for some than for others. And so we're having to kind of nudge, you know, more of our colleagues who are having a hard time, you know, making those adjustments and, you know, kind of educating them on, you know, this is what we're hearing from our students. So, you know, some of what I'm hearing is, you know, students have said, you know, I'm required that when I take tests, I have to leave my webcam on and I have to leave my audio on so that my professor can watch me and make sure that, you know, I'm not cheating. But I live in a household with 7 people and, you know, kids are running back and forth and it's loud, you know, and it's really uncomfortable for me and I don't have a lot of privacy. And so this is from students that are both, you know, non-parents, but in big households, and also students that are, you know, that have their own children as well. I see a lot of students talking about sharing devices and sharing time with one another. If they live with siblings or they live with children that are also expected to be Zooming and, you know, learning online at the same time, it's really hard to adhere to those required attendance policies. So somebody is not going to win, you know, in this situation. So our conversations, you know, about equity, about ensuring that students have what they need to achieve positive learning outcomes and graduation outcomes, I think are even more high stakes because now students are more at risk of not passing and of not enrolling in the fall. And so I think, you know, that's one of the most important reasons I think why I advocate for student parents so strongly. Because I think when we operate from the assumption that all our students are engaged in caregiving responsibilities, we end up benefiting most of our students who have responsibilities and, you know, and whose lives have been changed in ways that, you know, we can't even imagine. So, you know, when we make these adjustments, I think students feel supported as learners, as people, and then hopefully they will, you know, remain enrolled in school.
Yeah, and you said that this isn't even for student parents, it's for anybody who has that extra burden at home. Do you feel like the conversations are changing now? The administration is listening more?
Yeah, definitely. Something that I've been really heartened to see and really excited to see is that our own president has, he directly speaks to student parents and directly asks us to consider the complexities that student parents are experiencing right now. And, he's always been a strong supporter, and President Castro identifies as a former student parent as well. So I feel like, that support has always been there. And I think that now the situation is really demanding that we be very specific, about who is experiencing hardships, and we all are, but I think it's really powerful when we can specifically name what those hardships are, and considering that student parents have not always felt recognized or seen. It's so meaningful to them when they hear an administrator say, we know that you are, now your children's own teachers, right? We know that now your circumstances have, become more complicated. So I am seeing more of that conversation happen at the administration level. And so I'm really excited to see, right, how we can take this momentum and continue with it in the fall so that we can continue supporting student parents.
Yeah, well, thank you. And if anybody in the comments want to drop a question for Dr. Mercado-Lopez in the comments, you can go ahead and do that. So Dr. Mercado-Lopez, you were telling me when I spoke to you last time that you were actually a parent during grad school. Can you talk about that experience?
Sure. So I had 3 children during graduate school. I actually had my first one a few weeks after I completed my bachelor's degree. And then I had another one early on in my graduate school career. And then my third one right before I was starting my dissertation for my PhD. My husband, was attending school as well. He's former military and then came back and enrolled in school again. And so we were both student parents. I would say that it was a pretty isolating experience. I didn't have a lot of role models, and we just didn't, that was not, an identity that we really talked about at my institution. I felt, very proud of being a mother, even though it was something that, when I had my first daughter, I didn't expect that I would become a mother, right? Young. I was 21 when I had her. But I felt very, very proud, empowered by it. And I also felt very proud of being a scholar, and I was a highly ambitious scholar. I wanted a PhD and I wanted an academic job. But I was really having a hard time combining the two identities. And the messages that I was receiving as well were suggesting that it was really difficult to combine those identities. So I felt pretty conflicted in my attempts to try to embody, both of those identities. But I did have empathetic mentors. I had empathetic classmates, and that really helped me a lot. I ended up writing my dissertation on pregnancy and experiences of motherhood within Chicana literature. I was an English PhD student, and that was my way of intellectualizing an experience that didn't always feel very intellectual, and that felt very stigmatized, and that also just felt kind of wrong within academia. And so while I was a student, I was also teaching 2 courses a semester as part of my fellowship. I was teaching my own classes. And when I was pregnant with my third daughter, I remember having this kind of awkward, but overall pretty supportive conversation with my department chair about, how are we going to handle my delivery and my return back to classes? And she had 3 children herself, so she was pretty empathetic. But she didn't seem to know anything about Title IX, and I didn't know anything about Title IX as well. So, it felt like the 1 week that I was given off to deliver and, recover and come back, it felt like an under the table deal. And so, I had my baby on a Friday. I came back to class 10 days later. After I had an 8 o'clock class, and after my 8 o'clock class, I would rush to the parking lot and I would breastfeed my baby, and my husband was there with her waiting in the car. And then I would run back and teach my 9 o'clock class, and then come back and go home and work. So it was a pretty tough experience, but I was just I was really ambitious. I really wanted this particular career. I was doing it for myself, for my kids, for my community. I did find myself overextending myself and overcompensating because I felt really self-conscious as a scholar and as a mother within academia. And we shouldn't feel like we need to to compensate for that. So I wasn't short on ambition or ability, but I think just more awareness of the support systems that were out there and of the policies would have made it a more kind of empowering experience.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked. You only had 1 week off in that time you delivered and to go back.
Yeah. And
did you have gotten longer, or was that kind of like what they gave you?
Yeah, that was what they gave me. I was really afraid as well of losing my fellowship. And, I mean, my fellowship it paid my tuition and it gave me a small stipend. So that, and the terms of the fellowship also prevented me from having another job. So I really depended on that fellowship and kind of just, the prestige that came along with it and the teaching experience. So I didn't want, to lose that. So that, it felt like kind of a precarious situation. And, I felt like she was doing me a favor. Like I really felt like, oh, she's not mad at me. She helped to throw me a baby shower as well. I mean, that is support that not a lot of people get, especially graduate students, right? Who are made to feel like, oh, you're doing it wrong. So I was grateful for, whatever little I had. But, now what I'm seeing is that more student parents are organizing and more student parents are asking for policies that support them and that take into consideration, their teaching and pregnancy and all of that. So I'm really glad to see that is happening. And, but I think at that time, I didn't even feel empowered myself to organize because I just felt so isolated.
Yeah, and I know one of the other students I had spoken with, she had said her deliveries were kind of like planned to be like at the end of the semester. So it does take a lot of planning, I think. And so now you're a professor with 4 children. So what is your experience working at home during the pandemic like, and is it different from being a student?
Yeah, I'd say that there are probably some strong similarities, but some really important differences. I think, like student parents, I'm trying to figure out times to work and to also attend to my kids' needs. Trying to find quiet, private spaces to do my work. There's a lot more cooking, a lot more cleaning, a lot more housework. Trying to make sure my kids get exercise, and I'm trying to make sure that they stay positive. I have a 5-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 16-year-old. So, the teens are feeling kind of angsty, and the 5-year-old is, he goes from running circles around the kitchen to wanting to binge watch cartoons. So it's that, I think, handling the age range, for me is kind of challenging and something that our student parents are experiencing as well. But unlike them, I have job security, and, unlike them, like I'm not worrying about the future and the uncertainty of it the way that I was when I was an undergrad. I know I felt like I don't know what the future is going to bring. I think also, our student parents are wondering, what does this hold for graduation what, am I going to pass this class? Is my professor going to be understanding? And I think that's a major difference, is that I have total control, right, over the assignments when our class Zoom sessions are, even though I don't require them to attend, it's optional. I have control over all aspects of the course, and they don't. So they've lost, a lot of that sense of control over things right now, that they are, they've lost their childcare, they've lost their routine, they've lost their backup support, maybe even lost some income as well. So, I think that, when I look at the differences between me and them, that sense of agency and control, I think is something that I have a lot more of than they do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Isabel now. I think she has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, yeah, thank you. So this is actually a question that I received via email. So if you guys have any questions you want to ask Dr. Mercado-Lopez, please make sure to comment in the comments, or you can email us at edlab@fresnobee.com. But my question was from Amber Jacobo, and it was in regards to housing. And so I know that, we were talking about resources a little bit earlier, and you were talking about, how when you were a student, you were dependent on this fellowship. And I'm wondering, how is this going to affect, like, this current pandemic, shelter in place, students who might be dependent on student housing for like to be able to provide student housing, even like for their families or like for financial aid. How is this going to affect them?
So is she talking about students that are in student housing, or just housing in general?
Both. I mean,
Both.
like students who are student housing, but also like students who use financial aid, for example, to pay for their housing.
Okay, so I don't think students are losing their financial aid this semester. I don't think financial aid will be affected. And then their financial aid in the fall depends on how many classes that they're taking. I do know, so a couple of things. So, looking specifically at student parents, they cannot stay on campus. So student housing is not an option for them. If they are struggling with, with paying their rent, I know that there are some bills that were passed to protect renters, but I think there are even some exceptions within that. And I would actually recommend that she reach out to my colleague, Dr. Amber Krell, who's doing a lot of work on evictions and knows a lot more about the housing crisis and the implications for students. Another thing too, we have something called Project Hope on campus, and you can reach out to the clinical case manager, Diana, I think Karzogian, I think it's Karzogian. But if you look for Project Hope and the clinical case manager, that particular program connects students with resources related to basic needs. So, food, utilities, housing, all of that. So that would be an option. The other thing is that, so under the CARES Act that was recently passed, Fresno State will be receiving about $32 million to respond to, what's gone on with the crisis, the pandemic. And half of that is going to be going directly to students to meet, to provide relief.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Oh, did we lose her?
Looks like we lost her.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like we may have had some sort of a technical difficulty, but we'll see if we can try to get this rolling back again. If you guys can hold tight really quick, but also make sure I'll take this moment to put in a really quick plug that if you have any questions, leave a question in our comment section. Or below if you're watching on YouTube. And also to be sure to follow us all on social media. Our Twitter handles are at our names. I am at Isabel S. Dieppa. Ashleigh is at Ashleigh Panoo. And Dr. Mercado-Lopez is at L. Mercado-Lopez. And she's back. No worries.
That would happen. It's, just internet issues on my side now. So I am back. So the last thing, I'm sorry, where I left off was I was talking about the CARE Act and about the direct emergency aid relief that would be provided to students. So I don't know what that's going to look like right now, but there will be, or what the application process will look like, but there will be some funding available for students who are experiencing, any kind of a need, related to basic needs and also related to childcare as well. So, I'm sure that, any Fresno State students will be notified when those applications become available.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'll take it back to Ashleigh so that she can ask some more questions. And make sure to leave your comments if you have any questions for Dr. Mercado-Lopez.
Okay, so after the story came out, I received an anonymous voicemail from a caller who she said parents should use their self-discipline and wait until they finish college to have children. The caller said, don't engage in behaviors that result in children that are going to make it more difficult to get through life's journey. Get your education first and foremost. And then if you want to go out and get married and have kids and get their jobs, they need to get their ducks in a row. It's very simple. Do you find that there's a stigma attached to being a student parent? And what would you say to this person?
So, that's not shocking to hear that. I think that's a really common sentiment that I hear around, student parent issues. So I actually expected somebody to make such a comment. So first of all, how or why or how many times a student has a child is, first of all, not the issue. And second of all, it's not any of our business. Colleges should not be attempting to, interfere with or pass judgment onto adults' reproductive lives. Our job is to figure out how to respond and prepare. So second, this comment tells me that very little is known by this person about who student parents are. And I actually made a list here because sometimes I forget the diversity that exists within this group. So student parents are widows who are attempting to enter the job force for the first time, veterans who have lived full lives in the military and are now now pursuing their degrees, people who have left college because they had to take on jobs to support their parents and siblings and then had children along the way, former teen parents who have clawed their way through a system that marginalizes teen parents, people who have reached the top of their pay grade and who cannot be promoted without a degree, people who are making major career changes because they found new interests or new causes that they're passionate about, those who've married or entered relationships with partners who had children. And I'm also seeing students who don't have children of their own, but have become the primary caretakers or guardians for siblings or other family members. So I think for a number of folks, their ducks were absolutely in a row and then things changed, or they encountered a wall in their career, or like our veterans, they wanted a different way to build on and apply the skills they already had and needed a degree for it. So the university should be a welcoming space for anybody who wants to learn. We should be encouraging parents to be in our classrooms. And I find that, they bring such rich experiences and rich skills to our classrooms. And I think that their presence also really makes us live out our university values and, and our mission of inclusion. So in thinking about the children, if we are really concerned about children's outcomes, if we really care about children, our children today, about their future success in college and their careers, we really need to support the success of their parents. So to go back to the stigma, I think there absolutely, is still a stigma, even though we're told that being a parent is one of the most important jobs in the world. And, I think that there's this narrative that we've internalized. I know I internalized it growing up, is that, there's only one path to a college degree, and marriage and family and, children and pregnancy or adoption, right, is not a part of that path. So I think that the longer that we continue to internalize that narrative, the more that we continue to stigmatize students whose paths don't look like that particular path, right? And I think that's many of our students.
Yeah. And so I want to say thank you before we wrap up a bit. And I have one more question. Just if anybody who's watching can take anything from this conversation, what would you want to leave with them?
There's a lot. I'd say, know where your resources are on campus. If you're a pregnant student, know your Title IX rights and know that there's a Title IX office to support you. Connect with your professors if you're struggling. They might be more sympathetic than you think, especially now that I think a lot of them are feeling challenged as well. Know that we have a student cupboard on campus that supports in the form of food, but it also houses a diaper bank that was founded by one of our faculty, Dr. Jennifer Randalls and Jessica Medina. And, in a month or every month, we give away an average of 30,000 diapers. So it's an incredible service. I just want to reiterate about Project Hope, right? That's another program on campus. They can also reach out to me if they just want to chat or work through something. But I think the main takeaway that I want them to remember is that, they're not alone. They're one of thousands of student parents at Fresno State. And there is a community of faculty, staff, and administrators that sees them, that wants them to stay at Fresno State and, cares about them and that cares about their future. So, we see you, we believe in you, and, be really kind to yourself right now. I don't think there's a right way to do all this. So, if your kids feel loved and they're fed and cared for, then, you're doing a really great job.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mercado-Lopez, for joining in. Thank you so much, Ashleigh, for really just like making your article live. If you guys want to get the full piece, make sure to check out Ashleigh Panoo's piece, which we have pasted in the comments. Also, make sure to follow us on social media. So Dr. Mercado-Lopez is at El Mercado-Lopez, Ashleigh Panoo is at Ashleigh Panoo, and I'm at Isabel Dieppa. And finally, be sure to sign up for the EdLab newsletter, where we promise to only send you one email a week with all of the news of education happening in Fresno. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much again, Dr. Mercado-Lopez, for answering our questions and for being awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.